he just went low. He's in his head. He's in his head. He's open. His head wide open. Cracked open in the face.
Hey, what's going on, guys? It's Mario Mentalist 100 back again with another episode of How's My Team. We've got a full slate to talk about today. Obviously, we got Wanderers men, Wanderers women, we got the Giants playing, we got the Titans playing, we got Liverpool playing twice, we got a whole bunch to talk about. We got the Cubs to talk about. Obviously, we got the World Baseball Classic to talk about. We've also got obviously the Women's Asian Cup as well. We've got lots to talk about, so let's get started with the episode because it's going to be long enough as is. A few of these have been going over an hour, so I expect this one to be the same. So let's get started. So we're going to start the video as per usual with Liverpool. Obviously they're playing midweek. Today it's Friday, but we got to talk about Liverpool because obviously they played yesterday morning in terms of Champions League. Obviously Galatasaray playing the return leg with a 1-0 lead in the double legs of the round of 16, going to Anfield to play Liverpool in the second game, and it was a 4-0 drubbing from Liverpool over Galatasaray. So it's on aggregate score, it's 4-1, and Liverpool go through to the next round, go through to the quarterfinals of the Champions League. And what a game this was! Ultimately at home, it was 1-0 at half time. Dominic scored in the 25th minute. I was working at 9 o'clock. This was on at 7 in the morning. So when I was travelling to work, some of the second half was playing, and I missed 2 goals in the space of just 2 minutes after half time. In the 51st minute, Hugo ended up scoring, and then Ryan Gravenberch ended up scoring in the 53rd minute, which put us up 3. There was a goal that was disallowed by VAR to Wilfred Singo, but not long after that, in fact, actually that might have been a no goal initially, and then obviously there was a penalty, or it was a disallowed goal, and Mohamed Salah come in for the 4th goal in the 62nd minute, and it was a fabulous strike. Seen that one on that, as well as Dominic's goal as well, and we end the game with 4-0 scoreline in this game, the second leg, and obviously 4-1 on aggregate. So we continue on through to the quarterfinals again. Obviously last season this is where we actually stopped, but obviously lost against PSG, who ended up actually winning the whole thing. So it wasn't a bad situation where it was going to be a tough team regardless anyway, but ultimately, there's some other results. Obviously, Real Madrid, they won in their double games. So Manchester City has been knocked out. Most of the English sides that actually were left got drubbed. Chelsea, Newcastle, Tottenham especially, but Newcastle were not far behind. And Arsenal was the only other team that actually ended up winning and going through to the quarterfinals. So they're through as well. But speaking on PSG, that is our next opponent. Obviously, PSG was up against Chelsea. They ended up belting Chelsea in both legs. But yeah, we play on the 8th of April, and the second leg will be at Anfield on Tuesday the 14th. So ultimately, going up against last year's champions, obviously it's a revenge game for the round of 16 last year for Liverpool and PSG, and this is going to be a very tough game, very tough double leg quarterfinal. Obviously, I think if we win this one, it will be the winner of Real Madrid versus Bayern Munich, because Bayern Munich ended up belting Atalanta in the first leg. They belted them and put on a little bit of more pain in the second game, but not as much. But yeah, so whoever will be the winner of this game will go up against Bayern Munich or Real Madrid. And then on the other side, it's Arsenal and Sporting CP, and Atletico Madrid and Barcelona, I think, were the other two on the other side of the bracket. So, it's going to be very, very interesting to see who goes through to the semis. But ultimately for Liverpool, huge couple of weeks coming up, obviously. So we got, obviously, the FA Cup on the Saturday, the 4th of April with Manchester City. Obviously, Manchester City can now focus on the treble rather than quadruple, because obviously they've been knocked out of the Champions League, so they're up for the FA Cup. I think the Carabao Cup's still up for grabs, and obviously the Premier League race is still going on strong, despite obviously Manchester City being behind by a few points in that to Arsenal. In fact, I think it's still 9 points at the time of this recording. Yes, 9, with a game in hand. So ultimately that probably is only 6, but obviously Arsenal are still through to Champions League. So for Manchester City, I think this is a way to recharge a few things, kind of rest a few players around this, but obviously focus on the FA Cup, which obviously they're up against Liverpool on the 4th of April. And then obviously the Carabao Cup, when that comes up, obviously I think they're facing, they're up to face Arsenal, if not in the future in the final. And then obviously they've still got a game between each other very late in the Premier League season as well, another fixture. So very, very, very good result for Liverpool. Obviously that makes that week very important, because obviously we have a game on the 4th against Manchester City. Then we got a game on the 9th against PSG in France. And then we got a game on the 12th of April against Fulham at home. So got a little bit of travel, obviously at Etihad Stadium to Paris and then back to Anfield in the space of a week. All of this obviously is my time in terms of Australian time. So it's a late Saturday game in the FA Cup. Very early morning game on Thursday in the Champions League, and 2:30 in the morning on the Sunday for the Fulham game. But obviously all focus goes to Saturday this week, obviously against Brighton in the Premier League, to get some points on the board, because obviously we're still in 5th position fighting for a top 4 spot, obviously 2 points behind Aston Villa right now on the table, and 5 points behind Manchester United. So it's going to be very, very, very crucial couple of games, because obviously we do have Villa still to go, obviously to play against Villa. We've also got to play a chance against Chelsea, and we've also got to face Man United as well. So among obviously Fulham and Brentford and obviously Brighton as well. But big games coming up, especially in the month of May. But obviously month of April is looking like it's going to be solid as well. Obviously Manchester City in the FA Cup, PSG twice in the Champions League, and then obviously Merseyside derby, as well as against Crystal Palace as well, which I know Crystal Palace's position on the table, but in saying that, it is a big result, big game, because obviously with recent results over the last couple of years with Crystal Palace, obviously they've went really well against us, in fact been pretty much a bogey side for Liverpool the last couple of years. So it's one of those things. Why has it gone all the way back there? This app is weird sometimes. But ultimately, good job from the boys in the Champions League. 4-1 on aggregate, 4-0 in the game at Anfield against Galatasaray. And we'll say Galatasaray played really well, especially when they're in a position where they almost got knocked out completely. They almost dropped into the bottom 8 at one stage there, but obviously they kept in composure. They won their last game as well. And obviously some other results did go their way. But in saying that, obviously won against Liverpool as well, so that kind of helped them in the long run in obviously the group stages as well. But they played relatively well. I wouldn't say that they played horribly. Obviously, this game against Liverpool at home, away from home for them, obviously at home for Liverpool, they didn't play the best football at all. But in saying that, obviously they played well in the first leg, and to get to that point in time where the position they were at, even after the win against Liverpool, obviously losing a lot of games in the group stage and almost being, on the chopping block in terms of elimination outside of the playoff picture, they played relatively well. So again, I give credit where credit is due to them because they played relatively well this Champions League. Bodo Glimt, obviously, they were up in their game as well, and they got hunted down by Sporting CP. So it's unfortunate for them, but obviously I give props for them as well because obviously they had a stellar run themselves in the Champions League. Of a village, I think that's only like just over 40,000, I think, this team, coming from that area. So the fact that they made it to the round of 16 after looking like they weren't going to go anywhere close and looked like they were going to get eliminated very early, to drawing a couple of games, to winning a couple of games that were very important, and obviously winning in the playoff picture as well, getting into that round of 16 position. Great from them, and obviously props to them as well. Props to a lot of the sides that were in the round of 16 as well. Obviously not some of the English sides, but obviously like Newcastle, I'll give them credit because obviously they're playing some really good football. They've just been, they're in that middle stage of their Premier League right now, but obviously they played some really good football last season. You got to give it props to a lot of these teams, but obviously some of the results were not great for a lot of the English sides, especially in the first leg. In fact, I think there was only one team that ended up winning in their first leg, and I think that was Aston Villa, if memory serves me right, if not Newcastle. So, not Newcastle, Nottingham Forest. So that was a bit weird in that regard, but it's one of those things that only one of the teams ended up winning in their first leg game of European football, and then obviously there was two in the Champions League, and all the teams that were left in the Europa League and the UEFA Conference League ended up winning their games as well. So that was Crystal Palace, Nottingham Forest as well as Aston Villa as well. So, but props to Liverpool, props to Galatasaray, props to Bodo Glimt. There's a lot of teams there that I will give props to, but obviously focus now goes on to Brighton, going away from home, obviously for that game as well, in the Premier League, and a very, very crucial 3 points that Liverpool should pick up. But obviously it's going to be a tough game. They played Brighton not that long ago, but we'll see what happens. Hopefully we can get the 3 points in that game to put more pressure on the top four, especially third and fourth. That'd be great. But ultimately top four fight for Liverpool still in the Premier League, but obviously moving to the quarterfinals against PSG in the Champions League, and that is going to be a tough two-leg game because, obviously last year's champions, but again, revenge game for Liverpool, obviously for the round of 16 last year. So we'll see what the result ends up being, but PSG are going to be a very, very tough side to beat. And we're back Sunday morning, obviously back with Liverpool because they obviously played last night. I was up for most of this game, and it was a 2-1 loss to Brighton for Liverpool. So it was 1-1 at half time. They scored. Danny Welbeck scored in the 14th minute for Brighton. Then Milos Kerkez scored in the 30th minute for Liverpool. So it was 1-1 at half time. A few yellow cards here, there, and everywhere. And Danny Welbeck ended up getting a brace in the 56th minute to score for Brighton. And one thing I will say is that Liverpool, they had a few shots on target, but my God, the play today, last night was pretty bad in the second half, especially 53% possession to Liverpool, but yeah, we can say that the shots on target, 7 shots for Brighton, 5 shots on target for Liverpool, and 7 shots off target for Brighton and 4 off for Liverpool. But yeah, it's just one of those things that the passing accuracy was better. Like, a lot of things were better, a lot of stats were better for Liverpool. But they just, yeah. I don't know if it's a situation, obviously, of playing, Champions League football during midweek, and obviously some of that happening. Obviously, we had an injury as well. Obviously, Alisson Becker apparently was out before this game. I didn't even realise that he was out before the game against Brighton, and obviously won't actually be appearing for Brazil in their upcoming international friendly matches or international matches. Obviously, if they're not part of the World Cup right now, might be World Cup preparation for that. But Hugo went down very early in the game. I think after 8 or 9 minutes he went down. In fact, actually, I think he went down a little bit earlier than that. I think he went down in the first 6 minutes of the game. Got back up and then went down again a couple minutes later and actually got subbed off. So he'll be injured. Yeah, it's one of those things where, things happen, but I think it might have been collision. It might have been a situation with him in general. But I'm not sure what exactly happened with Hugo, but he went down. Yeah, he went down very early in the game, which was a bit unfortunate, especially with a little bit of momentum that Liverpool did have at the start of the game anyway. But obviously it didn't help things in the long run. But yeah, so 2-1 loss. So that means, Liverpool have a little bit of a break between games. Obviously their next game is on April the 4th. But they also stay in 5th position right now, which is crucial because they did drop points, but there was a few teams so far that have actually dropped points in the competition. Man United dropped points. They drew with Bournemouth on Friday night, Saturday morning. Chelsea also dropped points as well. They lost to Everton, so Everton are now 3 points behind Liverpool, which makes that Merseyside derby even more enticing because obviously that's a top 10 clash and always brings out the best of both sides there. But yeah, Chelsea also, yes, did lose. Man United obviously dropped points. Brentford obviously got a draw as well in their game, so they didn't actually jump into 5th position themselves because they could have. With a hefty win, obviously, they would have jumped in 6th position from where they are now with a win, but obviously didn't get one. Fulham ended up getting a good result. Bournemouth, obviously, they've dropped, obviously, a little bit on the table, but obviously that's because some teams in front of them have actually just jumped them. But yeah, the top 10, like we're talking from Man United, they got 55 points, right down to 10th position is 43 points, so there's 12 points difference with 6 or 7 games left to go. So very interesting. Only one that hasn't played so far out of the from second. Oh, obviously Man City have still got to play, but they won't play until next when they come back after the international break in terms of the Premier League, because they play in the Carabao Cup final. I think tomorrow morning. I think my time against Arsenal. So they've actually got an extra game in hand still. But Aston Villa haven't played yet. They play tonight, I believe, if not tomorrow morning. At the time of this recording anyway. But in terms of the table, Liverpool right now are in 5th position. So they stay in that position. They're still 2 points behind Aston Villa, but Aston Villa have that game in hand as well. So it could be a 4-point difference it's actually, 5-point difference. I can't count today. 5-point difference between 4th and 5th position, which would be huge for Aston Villa in particular, to try and cement a spot in the top 4. And obviously they'll be 1 point behind Man United as well, with Man United dropping points if Aston Villa do get a win. And they, if I check the table, they play West Ham. So obviously West Ham are in a really, really difficult spot right now. In fact, yeah. And then Nottingham Forest obviously have got a game against Spurs as well. So that could be a situation where there is a team that could jump out of the relegation zone and one jump and one drop down into it in that situation. But it's going to be a weird situation. In fact, realistically, if Nottingham Forest end up winning and West Ham ended up winning, that means that Spurs will be in the relegation zone at this point in time, because obviously it's the 1 point difference between West Ham, Nottingham Forest and Spurs. Obviously Leeds end up with that draw. They kind of jump 4 points out of the relegation zone on 33 right now, so they're kind of a little bit safe for another game. But it's, from 15th right down to 20th position is always going to be very tough. Burnley lost again as well. So that didn't help for them. Obviously Fulham won against Burnley. But as for the table right now, Arsenal on top still with 70 points. Man City in second position with 61, obviously with that game in hand. Third position is Man United with 55. Then fourth position is Aston Villa with 51 points, though obviously with that game in hand as well. Liverpool in fifth position with 49. Chelsea in sixth with 48. Then seventh position is Brentford with 46 points. Also on 46 points is Everton in eighth position. Ninth position is Fulham with 44. And then rounding out the top 10 is Brighton with 43 points. Newcastle, obviously with the game in hand still. They play Sunderland tonight, so that's actually the really big game for both clubs actually tonight. At the time of this recording, they're on 42 points in 11th position. Bournemouth are in 12th position, also on 42 points, but obviously getting a draw after being down twice against Man United in their game on Friday night, Saturday morning. 13th position right now is Sunderland with 40. So obviously they'll jump. They'll end up jumping into 11th position and take over from Newcastle if they end up winning against Newcastle tonight/tomorrow morning. So yeah, that's going to be a very enticing game in that, because obviously Sunderland can fight for the top 10 again with a win. Crystal Palace in 14th position with 39 points. Then 15th position is Leeds with 33. Obviously, Crystal Palace also has a game in hand as well. Who do they play? They play Manchester City, I believe. Newcastle. Their next game is against Newcastle, so obviously they got a game in hand as well to make up. So obviously that'll be probably the same week that Man City's making up their game as well. That's in hand right now. 16th position is Spurs, Tottenham Hotspur, with 30 points. 17th position is Nottingham Forest with 29 points. West Ham in 18th position in the relegation zone, also on 29 points. Just 4 goals separating the difference there between Nottingham Forest being in and being out of the relegation zone right now. 19th position is Burnley with 20, and Wolves still on the bottom with 17. So ultimately, Wolves could still obviously get off the bottom of the ladder. They still could go, but obviously it's 12, maybe 13 points will be the difference between getting out of the relegation zone and being in it for them. So obviously it's a little bit too late. They're probably going down. And we'll probably get the notification of them going down in the next couple of weeks. But ultimately with Wolves, if they get into a situation where they don't finish on the bottom of the ladder after starting so poorly. I think that's going to be a really good result for them. But obviously with that, Spurs, Nottingham Forest and West Ham also have got games in hand as well, as I said earlier. So ultimately, and a lot of them are against each other. Like obviously Spurs up against Nottingham Forest, and West Ham obviously going up against Aston Villa. So both of those games are very important when it comes to ladder position in terms of the Premier League, and a lot of those will be playing tonight/tomorrow morning. But obviously 2-1 loss to Liverpool, not an ideal situation at all, especially when you're fighting for the top four, and a lot of the teams in front of you have also lost or around you, with Chelsea obviously going down themselves, and obviously Man United also dropping points as well, losing in the same week as that. It doesn't help things. Obviously those games against those sides, obviously against Chelsea, against Aston Villa, against Man United, are going to be more enticing. Obviously that makes that game, even all the games that we have left, actually make it a bit more enticing, because obviously Fulham are in the top 10. If I look down, Fulham are in 9th position right now. So that's our next Premier League game when we get back. Then we got Everton, obviously they're in the top 10. Crystal Palace is the only team outside of the top 10 right now that we're playing in the future, because obviously Brentford are in there right now. Aston Villa is obviously in the top 4. Chelsea's just outside of us, and Man United are also in the top 4. So Crystal Palace obviously is the only one that's outside of that top 10 position on the table, but obviously they've been a very bogey side for Liverpool, as I've said multiple times over the last few weeks. So ultimately, every game in the Premier League for Liverpool going on, from obviously the next game, which is against Fulham in the Premier League, which won't be until the 12th of April. Every game after that is obviously very important, and a lot of those clashes, if not all the clashes, are going to be very, very, very difficult games to play and to win, because a lot of them, some of them obviously are at home. Obviously the one against Fulham is. Everton obviously is not. Obviously we're going to play the return leg of the Merseyside derby. Crystal Palace were at home. Old Trafford for Man United, at home against Chelsea, away to Villa Park for Aston Villa, and then obviously at home against Brentford. So it's going to be very, very difficult end to the season for Liverpool, but we need to turn things around, especially if we're fighting for a Champions League spot and don't have to use like the FA Cup or anything like that to get in there. Every game matters, every point matters at this point in time. So dropping points when other teams around us have dropped points is not an ideal situation. And speaking of dropping points, we go to the Wanderers men, and yes, that means that they lost again. And in fact, they played on Friday night, didn't record yesterday. I could have probably recorded some stuff yesterday, but didn't end up getting any time to do so. It was a 4-2 loss at home against Adelaide United. So, funny thing is with this game, they scored in the first 10 minutes again. They scored first, again, from Alex Gersbach. Then Adelaide United ended up scoring the 22nd minute, the first minute of stoppage time in the first half, and then Angus Thurgate ended up tying up the game in the 55th minute to make it 2-2. And it was looking like we had some momentum going in after that goal. There was a few shots that were very close to being on target as well, and they could have went in the net. Then Adelaide scored in the 63rd minute and the 71st minute to kind of break our hearts after that. But possession, we led the possession game again. So I don't know whether that stat is always good in terms of that, because every time that we lead, a lot of the times we lose if we're leading in the possession stat. 54%, 16 shots on goal compared to 26 from Adelaide. Adelaide had 10 on target, the Wanderers had 6. So the percentage, actually the shooting accuracy, was 38% apiece for both clubs. It's one of those things. Obviously 6 shots on target, More passes, better pass accuracy, better possession. A lot of the stats were very good, but it's one of those things where even the coach said it best, that obviously Adelaide wanted it more, and obviously they did, obviously in terms of points. But I think ultimately when it comes to this team, time and time again, a lot of the players that are in the team right now, there's like 3 or 4 players that might be playing for this club and trying to do good service to this club, but the rest of them are just basically getting a paycheck. They're collecting a paycheck at this point because they're not putting in the effort, and it's showing because their effort has been awful. So ultimately that keeps the Wanderers on the bottom again. It's not an ideal situation, obviously, for them. And what makes it a bit more crucial is the game that is the late game today as well, at the time of this recording, obviously on Sunday. Because the game that's last in this table is Perth versus Man City, obviously in Perth. And Perth are 1 point in front of us right now on the table. And Manchester City, Melbourne City are 4 points in front of us. They're in 9th position right now. So any points that Perth end up getting out of this, or either team really getting out of this, is not going to help the Wanderers get off the bottom of the ladder at all. Because obviously Wellington ended up winning against Brisbane, which didn't help things with Wellington, because obviously they were on 24, but they've won back-to-back in terms of wins for the first time in a while. Brisbane do drop to 10th position with 24, so they're only 3 points in front of us right now. But obviously we're in front in terms of scoring goals, in front of a few teams now. Obviously Melbourne City is one of them, but obviously they've still got that game in hand against Perth Glory. Brisbane as well, and Perth Glory as well, but they're only behind us by 2 goals at this point in time. So again, with that game at hand to play today. But it's coach did say it best. They just didn't want it. Adelaide wanted it more. Obviously Adelaide in the top 4 at the moment. Obviously Sydney FC has still got to play against Newcastle Jets. Newcastle should be thanking MacArthur Bulls as well, because MacArthur ended up winning against Auckland FC as well. Pretty unexpected in terms of things. Melbourne Victory ended up winning against Central Coast as well, so they've dropped Central Coast to 7th position with that, and obviously the win with MacArthur as well. So they didn't help the Mariners in terms of that as well. But obviously it's a couple of games to go. Sorry, I'm sniffing. I just feel that its nostril is full of, it's blocked. Trying to breathe a little bit, and it's not working. But obviously we'll make this quick. Newcastle Jets on top with 40 points. At this point in time, obviously we'll give you an updated table for this and the Premier League, and obviously the Women's A-League as well tomorrow. We'll talk about that when it comes to games. But obviously Newcastle Jets on top, 40 points. Auckland FC in second with 39, so 1 point behind them, obviously with Newcastle to play today. Third position is Melbourne Victory with 35, so 4 points behind Auckland FC. And fourth position, also on 35 points, is Adelaide United. It's just goal difference there. Obviously, in terms of Victory, they've got plus 10, and Adelaide got plus 7 right now. And in fact, actually, Melbourne Victory have turned that right around, because at the start of the season, they looked like they weren't going to score anything for quite a while. And yeah, they're in front by 10 right now. So that's pretty good for them, all things considered. Also with the game in hand, obviously in fifth position is Sydney FC. They go up against Newcastle, so they could jump back up into third position with a win today. But obviously against the Jets, it's always going to be a tough game for both clubs, but especially for Sydney FC. And then rounding out the top six is MacArthur Bulls with 28 points. 7th position is Mariners with 27. Also on 27 points is Wellington Phoenix, obviously with that win over Brisbane. 9th position is Melbourne City with 25, obviously with a game in hand. Brisbane in 10th position with 24 points. Perth Glory in 11th position with a game in hand with 22. And Wanderers still on the bottom with 21 points. Obviously next round obviously is not until the 4th of April for the Wanderers. So obviously that international break, and it's obviously against Melbourne City. So any games coming up are going to be very important, very vital for points to try and get off the bottom of the ladder. Wellington have Victory, Perth Glory have Mariners as well that week. So it's a lot of and Brisbane have Sydney FC. So a lot of the games coming up for teams from the 2nd of April, obviously. Saturday, Perth play on Saturday. We also play on Saturday, the 4th. So it's going to be very, very important in terms of points. And then obviously after that Melbourne City game, we have the last of the Sydney derbies for the year in terms of the regular season. Obviously, it's probably not going to be it's probably going to be the last one of the season in general, because we're definitely not playing finals, because we'd have to win pretty much almost all our games, and a lot of teams to lose a bunch of their games, including obviously Wellington, Brisbane, a lot of teams around. You'd have to have like MacArthur, Central Coast, Mariners, all the teams that are in front of us, they'd have to lose. So all from Perth, Brisbane, Melbourne City, Wellington, Mariners, and MacArthur would all have to lose. And the Wanderers just have to keep on winning, which with this team, apart from a couple of players, I don't see that being the case. But 4-2 loss obviously for the Wanderers at home against Adelaide United. And we go from the football to the AFL. Obviously other football, Aussie rules. Obviously with the Giants. Now, what I will say with prefacing this game is that this game actually started late because there was lightning strikes. In fact, there was actually 2 lots of lightning strikes. So when it comes to lightning strikes in terms of the AFL and a lot of sport, is that they'll have a 30-minute delay when there's lightning strikes in the vicinity of a particular stadium, especially if it's open roof, which obviously NG Stadium is, because obviously the Giants were playing at home. So it actually reset because obviously, but in that 30-minute period, obviously we had lightning strikes again. So the game didn't start until 50 minutes after it was supposed to be initially started. So it was a bit weird. I wasn't sure what the hell was going on because the timer on my app obviously says, the first quarter is in like this amount of time, or second quarter if it's like, maybe like the third quarter will say, third quarter will be in 15 minutes because obviously it's, during the halftime break. And it'll tell you the amount of time. And, I think this game was supposed to start at 4:15 yesterday. And the timer was at like 20 odd minutes, and I'm like, what the hell is going on? Not knowing obviously the lightning strikes until obviously I seen the article on the AFL and a post on the AFL Facebook page, and I was like, oh, okay, that makes more sense. But obviously with that, the Giants ended up playing against St Kilda at home. And it was a 4-point loss to the Giants against the Saints. Very, very, I wouldn't say pitiful performance, because obviously it was looking like it was going to start that way, because it was as high as a 39-point lead for the Saints. And obviously I'll break it down by score. Ended up being 5 goals for in the first quarter compared to 1 goal 3. In fact, actually the Giants ended up scoring, I think they ended up scoring the first goal of the game. I think the Saints had scored the first points on the board. But 5 goal 4 quarter to start off with was not great in terms of conceding, because obviously that's a lot of points to start off with. That's 34 points in the first quarter. Then it was 3 goals 4 to the Saints compared to 2 goals 3 for the Giants, which means that St Kilda were up by like 28 or something like that at halftime. In fact, actually, I think it was 32, I think it was. Then they scored 2 goals too in the third quarter, compared to 2 goals and 7 behinds for the Giants. So very inaccurate in the third quarter. But then the Giants end up kicking 5 goals and 1 behind, compared to 1 goal and 2 behinds to the Saints. So they were coming home red hot, and once I seen that they were starting to come in, I think the points started coming in. It's come in under 20 points. So I was like, here you go. I think I got to 21 points. I think from like 35. I think late in the third quarter, I'm like, here they come, and here come the Giants. And surely enough, they almost snagged it. I think there was like 20 odd seconds before when they kicked their last goal of the game. So they could have overrun them in the last 30 seconds. And the Saints held on for a 4-point win. Obviously, 78-74, 11 goals 12 to 10 goals 14. So when it comes to inaccuracy in front of goal, especially in the third quarter, definitely probably killed us. As well as obviously our midfield, because I said it last week, even in the video, I'm pretty sure, and I even said leading up to this game, especially after the Melbourne game that St Kilda had, they got blitzed in the midfield, and if we had pressure in the midfield against them and against their upper back line, like the halfback line, we probably would have been okay. And probably would have done well, but obviously that didn't happen, and we got overrun pretty early, and conceding, I think, well over 50 points in the first half definitely did not help a lot. It's one of those things where, obviously the Giants obviously ended up having a better scoring second half. In fact, they did 10 goals, so obviously it was 7 goals and 8 behinds. Am I counting that right? Yeah. 7 goals, 8 behinds in the second half, compared to 3 goals, 6 in the first half. It's one of those things where stuff like that happens, but we really need to be a lot better than that, because we shouldn't be losing. Obviously, it was a close game, but obviously against a side that were pretty hard done, and obviously have played relatively okay the last couple of weeks, but had an opportunity to win this game. It's one of those things. So in terms of stats, highest goal kickers for the Giants obviously was Phoenix Goddard, who's been a really good player since he's actually debuted. He's kicked a few goals for the Giants, which has been great, obviously with Tom Green being out. So obviously he's been playing relatively well. Jesse Hogan also scored 2. Then Angwin scored 1. Max Grueski scored 1. Clayton Oliver scored 1, and really brought the momentum through, because I think he was one of the first to kick a goal late in that third quarter and early in that fourth quarter to kind of keep the momentum on the Giants side. Harry Ralston scored 1. Jake Stringer scored 1. Harry Thomas scored 1. And that is it in terms of goals. But ultimately, it's one of those things. Obviously, the Giants, they played hard, especially in the second half, and it seemed like they were obviously better second half playing team this season as compared to last season as well. And with that loss, that also means that the Giants actually do drop at least a position for now into 11th position outside of the wild card spots, because obviously they were in 10th last night before the St Kilda game, and obviously St Kilda jump into 9th position with that win. But obviously a few games still to play. I think at the bottom of the table, I think Port Adelaide, Essendon or West Coast are still going to play. There's a few teams obviously that are on byes this week, which is kind of throwing me off a little bit. So I'm not sure which team is which and who's on the bye and who isn't. But that also makes this game coming up on Friday night against Collingwood very, very important for the Giants. Obviously, Collingwood in 8th position. They ended up, they were on the bye this week. But obviously makes that journey to Melbourne all the more crucial with Collingwood. Because obviously Collingwood haven't been playing relatively great. But obviously did get a win against the Saints in the first week of in the opening round, but obviously got beaten by the Adelaide Crows last week. But it makes it more crucial for the Giants. Obviously, big clash for both clubs before the Giants end up having the bye. But with momentum obviously going against us, obviously with a lot of injuries that have hit this club as well, we need to possibly get as many wins as possible in the first half, especially if we're looking to get some of these players back in the second half of the season, whether it be very late in the season or towards the midway point. But we need points on the board. It's one of those things that really needs to turn things around because we need it, and we need it badly. But obviously 4-point loss is not as bad, but obviously that 81-point loss to the Western Bulldogs obviously didn't help us in a lot of regards, especially with their percentage. And obviously we need wins, and we need good, healthy wins as well coming up. Collingwood could be the first of a couple, but we need to have some momentum on our side because there's a lot of teams around us that are playing relatively okay football to really good football. And we're going to be fighting for a spot in that top 10 and hopefully in the top 6 outside of that wild card spot. But who knows at this point with the injuries that we've had. But 4-point loss to the Saints, obviously with a lot of momentum on our side in the last quarter especially. Hopefully we can turn that into a more consistent game against Collingwood on Friday night coming up. Because, yes, we might be in Melbourne, but it's a very crucial game, and I know every game is crucial. But this one, especially early in the season, you want to go 2-2 rather than 1-3 with the Giants obviously going into their bye in round 4. It's going to be very important to try and get a win from Collingwood in many regards. And in fact, in terms of Collingwood, obviously, yes, they're in 8th position, but they're also on 1 win, 1 loss. So they'll be on 1-2 with a loss to the Giants. So hopefully we can turn things around a little bit. But what else is new? And there's a lot of stuff going against us this season, and I feel like, eternally that I feel like I'm cursed every time. Alright, Monday morning, so we've got to talk about a couple of games. Obviously we'll start with the Wanderers women's team. Obviously was their last game at home for the season against Melbourne City. Obviously Melbourne City being at the top of the table, always going to be a tough clash. In fact, realistically, obviously a few weeks back when we played them again, we got belted. We didn't get belted this time. It was a 2-1 loss to Melbourne City for the Wanderers women, but they played relatively well. The issue with that is that we had a red card, actually, in the game, in the 17th minute for Melbourne City. And then 7 minutes later, Melbourne City ended up scoring. And then, all hell broke loose. So they scored in the 24th minute. There was a red card was in the 17th minute, and then they also scored in the 45th minute just before halftime. So it was up 2-0 at half. Then there was a wonderful strike in the 53rd minute to Talia Yunus from long range, curled it into the top corner from well outside the box. It was a fantastic goal for her. The pressure was on Melbourne City a lot. But just couldn't get over the line at the end of it. So I think that was notable in this game. I think, despite the loss, Obviously, a loss does still put pressure on the Wanderers women to stay off the bottom of the ladder. 67% possession to the Wanderers, so a lot. 6 shots for the Wanderers, 12 shots for Melbourne City, and it's 6 shots on target for Melbourne City and 2 shots on target for the Wanderers. So shooting accuracy was 33% for the Wanderers. But yeah, obviously that red card was a straight red. Seen it, yeah, it was a bit of a scuffle, push and shove especially. But yeah, it's not needed. But with that, obviously that means that the Wanderers women are still in 10th position. So we'll go over the table because I think all the games are played for that. Obviously there is a catch-up game for the Mariners and Wellington Phoenix in the women's competition. So realistically, when it comes down to that, we'll say why that matters in a second. So Melbourne City on top with 37 points. Then 2 games back is Wellington Phoenix with 31. So that makes the game on, what day is it, Wednesday? Just had it on my screen. Yeah, on Wednesday night. So just after this video goes up. Made that game very crucial against Wellington because obviously a win will put them 4 points behind with the game in hand, and obviously for the Mariners, if they end up winning, they'll jump into 5th position into the top 6. So it's very important for both teams to get a win there. But probably more important for Wellington if they want to try and get a top spot. Obviously, they'll have a top 2 finish, but they've obviously got Canberra United just behind them with 30 points, as well as Adelaide United also on 30 points as well in 4th position. Wellington only have 31, so it makes a very crucial clash on Wednesday for both Wellington and Mariners. 5th position is Melbourne Victory with 25. Then Brisbane Roar also on 25 points in 6th. 7th position is Perth Glory with 24. Then obviously, as I say, Mariners with 23 in 8th position. 9th position is Newcastle Jets. Obviously, they helped us a great deal. In fact, they were behind in their game against Sydney FC. Sydney FC did score first. But I think it ended up being 4-2 or 4-1. Means Wanderers are on in 10th position with 16 points, and Sydney FC on the bottom with 15 still. Just obviously that goal difference is not helping us in the slightest right now. I think it's minus 17. I think it's last I checked. No, the women. Oh, sorry, Wellington. Wellington helped us. Brisbane beat Newcastle, but I thought it was Newcastle. But yeah, Sydney FC scored first, and it was 3-1, 3-1 loss to Wellington. Obviously, this coming week for the women, it's their last game of the season, going up against Wellington. So very crucial game. Obviously, it's a big blue for the Sydney FC, and then obviously Sydney FC have the Mariners in the last round as well. So could still get out of the way of being on the bottom, but if they get a draw in either games, that's it. The Wanderers will be on the bottom if they don't win against Wellington. Yeah, obviously with that victory, obviously fighting for a top 4 spot. Possibly won't get a top 4 spot. They're 5 points behind with a couple of games left, but obviously want to consolidate a spot in the top 6, and obviously with the Big Blue, obviously rivalry in that as well, and then obviously Mariners are in 8th position rather. I'm looking at the wrong table. It keeps loading to the men's table for whatever reason when I press the ladder option. So Yeah, we'll go over the men's table in the miscellaneous stuff as well. But yeah, very important game, obviously, for the Wanderers against Wellington. Obviously, Wellington playing twice this week, obviously playing on Wednesday and then playing on Sunday at 2 p.m. My time. And I believe, obviously, that's our last game of the season, and it's away as well. So it's in New Zealand. So it'd be, I think 12, 2 hours ahead, so it might be 4 o'clock in the afternoon for that game in particular in New Zealand. But yeah, 2-1 against obviously the ladder leading Melbourne City team, but they've been playing relatively well. So the fact that we got anywhere close to them is notable. But yeah, we'll see what happens. But not a lot that we can do about. And then Melbourne City actually have the bye as well, so that kind of hampers them a little bit. They'll be very nervous going into the last round in a couple of weeks' time. But yeah, so the Wanderers 2-1 loss to Melbourne City, still sitting in a second last position, but still ahead of Sydney FC at this point in time with 2 weeks to go. And then we go from one team that did relatively well, especially in the second half, to a team that didn't do well at all in the game. We got to talk about the Titans. Obviously, they're the last ones for the week, and it was a 30-16 loss to the Cowboys in Townsville. So 14-point loss there as well. Very pitiful from the Titans, honestly. Obviously they were down at half time, 22 points to 10, so they weren't completely out of it. But obviously scoring 6 points, Cowboys scored 8 points, so they outscored us in both halves as well. So Murray Taulagi scored first, then converted, then Jaden Campbell in his return game for the Titans ended up scoring 2 in the space of about 6 minutes, which was great. Missed the conversion on the second one. Murray Taulagi scored a double late in the 22nd minute. Then Scott Drinkwater got a break in the middle of the field late in the 28th minute to score, and it was converted. And then Jackson Purdue just went through a hole that was relatively big very early in the 33rd minute to make it 22 points to 10 with the conversion. Curtis Moran scored late in the 41st minute, so a little bit just after half time, maybe like the second set of the second half. Scored relatively near under the post. There was a penalty kick as well for the Cowboys. There was a high shot. There was also a high shot and obviously 10 in the bin very late in the game as well, with Jaden Campbell getting hit high, and then obviously Tom Chester went off for a sin bin for 10 minutes, but the Titans didn't end up scoring. In fact, Jay Clifford even scored himself as well for the last try of the game. But yeah, very average from the Titans. Honestly, I feel like it was 60% possession to the Cowboys. Completion rate was 77%. There was a lot of errors, especially from like Tino, from Mo. Jaden Campbell played relatively well. But I think it was him, Curtis Moran. I think those two were the only two really good players on the field. Keanu Kinney under pressure again as a fullback, and honestly, we got to kind of look at ourselves right now and say, do we want AJ Brimson in at 6, or do we want him in the fullback role and have Keanu Kinney in and around the ball in the centres or something like that? Because we can't have a situation where he's not doing anything on the field. We have Lachlan Ilias as well, so it's not like we can't have him on the field. So I think maybe going into the next game, we have Jaden Campbell in at halfback and have Lachlan Ilias in at 6, possibly, or the other way round. Obviously, having Jaden at 5'8" and having Lachlan Ilias as halfback. I don't know which way you want to go with it, but yeah. Pretty disappointing. So it's the late game Sunday again this upcoming week against the Dragons. The Dragons also lost yesterday against the Eels, which means that the Dragons and the Titans are the two teams on the bottom with no points. That means it's another spoon bowl game, as it was this week against the Cowboys, because the Cowboys were near the bottom of the ladder as well. But obviously that makes it minus 58 points in terms of for and against for the Titans already this early in the season. Obviously the next team that's up from that is the Roosters, but yes, the Roosters also got belted by 40, and obviously actually got belted by 40 twice. Obviously last week against the Panthers, and then obviously in week 1 against the Warriors. So yeah, not a great situation to stay on the bottom of the ladder, but more things change, the more they stay the same. It seems with this Titans team, and obviously people need to pull their finger out, because we could have a situation where Zane Harrison could go in as 5'8" or halfback, and have him with Jaden Campbell, and have Lachlan Ilias on the field in the interchange. I don't know, but we just need to change something, because some of these players are not playing to their potential, and it's really, really grating, and it's really starting to get on my nerves, because they should be ready for it. And ultimately, yes, this game coming up will be the first game at home, but we shouldn't be losing by 40, choking a lead and losing by 4, and then losing by 14 against a team that played relatively shit in the first 2 games of their season in the Cowboys. In fact, obviously the Dolphins played like shit in the first, played relatively okay against the Rabbitohs in round 1 for them, but Cowboys played okay against the Knights, but played absolutely terribly last week or the week before against the Tigers, and then we lose by 14 points. Curse is real. Curse is fucking real. Alright, and with that, we'll go over some miscellaneous stuff before we finish this episode. We'll talk about the Liverpool women's team. They played last night. They played against Brighton, and it was a 0-0 draw for both of them, both teams. Nothing too eventful in the game, but it does put us a point above, another point in front of both Leicester City, so that puts us 5 points away from the bottom and 2 points away from West Ham as well. Obviously, Leicester City also ended up playing last night against Aston Villa. Aston Villa have moved up to 8th position with 20 points now, so they obviously won in the game. So that's good for them as well. In fact, actually, I will have a look at that now. But yeah, 2-1 it ended up being for Aston Villa over Leicester City. So Leicester City still dragging on the bottom. As for the men's, there is a little bit of movement around the table, because it's been very interesting. Obviously, Arsenal still on top. Manchester City still in second, Man United third. Obviously going down to the table, to the stuff that really matters with the movement. Fulham obviously 9th position, Brighton in 10th position. Sunderland overtake Newcastle because they ended up winning 2-1 in their derby game against Newcastle United, so they move up to 11th position with 43 points, whereas Newcastle drops to 12th with 42. And also another big notable result, Nottingham Forest ended up winning, obviously. They ended up winning, so they jump Tottenham Hotspur into 16th position with 32 points, which drops obviously Tottenham down to 30. So Tottenham ended up losing as well. Obviously to Nottingham Forest. West Ham did lose to Chelsea. To Aston Villa. So Aston Villa are now 1 point behind Man United in fourth position, 54 points, and is now 5 points in front of Liverpool, who are in fifth position, and obviously 6 points in front of Chelsea in sixth position. So very, very crucial win for Aston Villa there, especially trying to make up the numbers in the top four for Champions League. But obviously it makes things a little bit interesting for the season going, as in the future when we come back to the Premier League. Obviously we'll talk about the Carabao Cup. Obviously they played this morning. It was 2-0 to Manchester City. So the idea of Arsenal having a quadruple is in tatters. In the same week that Manchester City's quadruple hopes actually went up in flames, obviously with losing to Real Madrid in the Champions League. So Manchester City end up getting some silverware this year. Arsenal still waiting. Obviously they're still in the FA Cup. They've still got treble hopes, but obviously they got some tough games coming up, including obviously another one against Manchester City later in the Premier League season. So it's going to be very interesting for them to see where they end up. Obviously 9 points in front. Oh, actually, was it 9 points in front? 9 points in front. Just making sure that I actually got that total right. Yes, 9 points in front, but obviously Manchester City have that game in hand, which I believe is against Crystal Palace, because Crystal Palace is also down to 30 games in match week 31. So, so it's obviously some points to make up, but obviously they got a game against each other at some point, so we'll see what happens with that. But I love that the predictor was kind of the opposite and saying that it was going to be 2-0 to Arsenal over Manchester City, and it was 2-0 to Manchester City over Arsenal. We'll go with the AFL with a couple of other wins, including obviously one to West Coast over North Melbourne, so props to them for getting the win yesterday. The Giants dropped into 13th position with percentage. So that leaves Brisbane Lions, Richmond Tigers and Essendon Bombers all on the bottom with no wins so far after a couple of games, but a few of those teams were on byes this week. Essendon obviously not so, but Brisbane and Richmond I believe were on the bye. But yeah, so not a great result obviously for the Giants, especially that big loss. A-League men's table, there's not too much change, but unfortunately for us, Perth Glory ended up getting a very late equaliser in the game against Manchester City. It's twice I've done it this episode. Against Melbourne City, so that leaves the Wanderers still on the bottom, but 2 points adrift from the bottom of the ladder, and 3 points adrift from Brisbane Roar in 10th position. So Newcastle on top, 43. Auckland with 39 points. Obviously Newcastle with a win over Sydney FC, so buffers that to 4 points at the top. Melbourne Victory in third with 35. Also in 35 is Adelaide United. In fourth position, fifth position is Sydney FC with 33, and MacArthur Bulls round out the top six with 28 points. Then Mariners with 27 in seventh, Wellington Phoenix in eighth with 27, Melbourne City with 26, Brisbane with 24, Perth with 23, and the Wanderers on the bottom with 21. Obviously, we've got to talk about a few things. Obviously, in the baseball, the Cubs have been up and down all over the place so far this week, going into the first week of the season, obviously for them. But they beat the Brewers today, this morning. It was 12 runs to nothing, which was fantastic for them. They beat the Mariners yesterday, 7-1. And also the Prospects also won against the Padres 7-5 as well. So they played relatively well. 2 wins for the Cubs there yesterday. The day before, it says it's Friday, but it was Saturday. The Reds were leading 8-0. Ended up being 8-6 loss for the Cubs, but they were also playing another game at the same time, and they lost to the Athletics 6-2. So when it comes to the last couple of weeks, obviously they didn't play Thursday. Wednesday, they ended up losing to the Diamondbacks 16-8. And then obviously won against the Angels 8-6. So after winning against the Guardians on the Monday at 5-2 on the 16th. So losing to the Dodgers 14-8 as well. So not ideal, but obviously looking ahead, obviously play the Yankees tomorrow and on Wednesday as well. Before the Yankees obviously play on Thursday morning my time. Actually, no, today is Monday. So yeah, Thursday. Sorry, yeah, it's saying obviously with my time in mind on the games, but it's telling me the dates on them, and I'm like, today is Monday. Why like we hadn't played that game against the Yankees, but it's tomorrow's game. But obviously the Yankees play on Thursday. We play our first game of the normal regular season on Friday. Against the Nationals, and I think we're actually playing at home in that game. I think we're playing Wrigley Field. Yeah, Wrigley Field for the first game of the Cubs season. So very interesting. World Baseball Classic as well. I should actually mention that. I'll get that up and mention that Venezuela did end up winning the Baseball Classic for the first time ever against the USA, 3-2. So they ended up being champions in the Asian Cup, the Women's Asian Cup. Australia did end up beating. They ended up beating China 2-1 very late or very early in the second half, and their defense held strong. Japan ended up winning 4-1 in their semi-final against Korea Republic. Obviously the same team in our group that we ended up drawing very late against to get second position in our pool. And then obviously the final was on Saturday, and they ended up the Australians, Matildas ended up going down 1-0 against Japan. But one thing I will say, obviously it is a little bit of heartbreak in terms of that and how well they played. We'll just say that Japan in every game had scored 2 or more goals in every single game, including they were up two goals plus in all their games apart from the final, and scored 3 or more goals in all but 2 of the games. Obviously their first pool game against Chinese Taipei, they ended up winning 2-0. And then obviously against the final against Australia, they only won 1-0. But they won all the way through, so there was only 2 results that went over 2 goals in their entire Asian Cup campaign, and they only conceded 1 goal all tournament long, and that was in their semi-final against Korea Republic, with obviously Korea having the slightest hopes in the last 10-15 minutes with the goal back, and it ended up was 3-1 at that point, and then Japan ended up scoring couple minutes later to make it 4-1, so that kind of didn't help Korea in the end. But all credit to the Matildas. Obviously they played well. They had a few shots on target very early in the game, towards the middle of the game, and especially in the second half, and very late in the second half. There could have been at least 1 or 2 goals up against Japan, but Japan, didn't play the best game. They did have a few mistakes, but obviously in a final you kind of expect that that's going to happen. There's obviously some situations of some mistakes, but the goal that obviously separated the teams was the one that mattered, and it was a beautiful strike regardless. So finishing against a team that's world number 6 in the world, even leading into that final of the Asian Cup. It was always going to be a tough task for the Matildas. I think just outside the top 10, if not they were in the top 10. Obviously, at the end of the World Cup a couple of years ago, obviously they've cemented their place, obviously, for the World Cup for next year. So obviously, all focus in terms of the international team will be focused on that now. But obviously, reviewing some of obviously the tape for Japan, especially if we do go up against Japan in the World Cup, which I would suspect that we would, considering how well they played. If they keep the momentum up for another 12, 18 months in terms of the Japan women's team, they'll be in the mix in the last 16 of the World Cup, most definitely. So we'll see how we go, but obviously credit to Japan. They played relatively well. They played a fantastic tournament. Obviously only conceding 1 goal all tournament, winning most of their games by 2 or more goals, except for obviously the final. But it was a hard-fought game. It could have went either way, but obviously it went Japan's way. What can you say? And obviously credit Matildas for obviously being in a situation and getting to the final, obviously winning the quarterfinal pretty well, winning the semi-final despite getting absolutely blitzed. Especially in the quarterfinal, obviously there was a lot of defense in that game, but obviously scoring goals that mattered in both that and the semi-final as well, and holding strong in both games. They played really well. So I think in a home competition like that, home tournament, they have nothing to be ashamed of because they played relatively well. Just didn't get it on the night, and that happens. But yeah, they played relatively well. But I think that'll be it for this episode of How's My Team. Obviously, we don't have Premier League to talk about next week. Obviously, we'll have a lesser week next week because obviously we only have to talk about the Titans, the Giants, the Wanderers women as well. And I think that's it. I think Liverpool as well. The Liverpool women obviously play next week as well. But apart from that, obviously Liverpool are off for the Premier League for a couple of weeks, as is the Wanderers for the men's team. Saturday the 28th. And then obviously it's a Merseyside derby for the women. So that's all the more important for both teams. In fact, I think Everton are in 6th position, Liverpool in 10th, and there's 6 points difference between the two teams on the table right now. So it'd be very interesting to see what the women bring up. But obviously we got that, and obviously we'll talk about the Cubs as well, because obviously their season will start on Friday, my time. So a few things to talk about. We'll see if the episode's a little bit less, but with all that said, thank you guys so much for watching this episode of How's My Team. This has been Mario Mentas 100. You guys have a great day night, and of course, take care.